They tried to kill me with the very air I breathed. For 23 days, I sat in that office making decisions for my people while French poison coursed through my lungs. They thought a slow death would be cleaner than a bullet, more deniable, more sophisticated. But here's what these colonial masters never understood. You cannot poison a man who has already tasted the bitterness of watching his continent bleed for centuries. When they calculated my death down to the exact day, they forgot one thing. I am not my predecessors who died quietly in their sleep. I am the generation that refuses to die on schedule. And now that I know what lengths they'll go to silence African sovereignty, I'm done playing by their rules entirely.
For 23 straight days, Ibrahim Traoré had been walking into his office and breathing death. Every meeting, every signature, every decision that shaped Burkina Faso's future, he was making them while poison coursed through his lungs. The assassins had calculated everything perfectly: the dosage, the delivery method, the timeline. In exactly 30 days, Africa's most defiant leader would simply disappear. No bullets, no explosions. Just a mysterious illness that doctors would blame on stress, but they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated a janitor with a secret. What I'm about to tell you sounds like fiction, but every word is documented, every detail verified. And by the end, you'll understand why intelligence agencies around the world are now studying this case as the perfect assassination that perfectly failed. It started with a smell that didn't belong. October 9th, 2024, 5:43 a.m., the Palace of State in Ouagadougou. Jacques Traoré pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway, the wheels echoing in the pre-dawn silence. 11 years of cleaning these corridors had taught him the rhythm of this place. Every sound had meaning. Every shadow had purpose. But when he opened the door to President Traoré's office, something was wrong. The smell hit him immediately. Sweet, almost floral, but with an underlying metallic edge that made his stomach turn, like fruit rotting in a chemistry lab. Most people would have dismissed it, maybe blamed it on the building's old ventilation system, maybe assumed a rodent had died somewhere in the walls. But Jacques wasn't most people. See, before political persecution forced him into this job, Jacques had been a chemical engineer, trained in Paris, fluent in the language of molecules and compounds. And this smell? It was speaking to him in a dialect he recognized, but wished he didn't. Organophosphates, the family of chemicals that includes everything from pesticides to nerve agents. Standing there in the doorway, Jacques faced a choice that would either save a president or destroy his own life. Because who would believe a janitor claiming someone was trying to poison the most powerful man in Burkina Faso? But as he moved closer to Traoré's desk, directly under the main air conditioning vent, the smell intensified, and Jacques' engineering mind began calculating possibilities that terrified him. This wasn't decay. This was chemistry. Deliberate chemistry. What happened next would expose an assassination plot so sophisticated that investigators would later call it the invisible murder. Instead of reporting through official channels, which would have gotten him laughed at or arrested, Jacques made a decision that saved Traoré's life. He went to his nephew. Antoine Sawada was 28 years old, worked in the palace medical unit, and had something invaluable: a degree in toxicology and access to chemical detection equipment that had been installed just months earlier. When Jacques explained what he'd discovered, Antoine's first reaction was disbelief, then fear. "Uncle, do you realize what you're suggesting? If we're wrong, we'll both be in prison by noon." But as they stood in that office at 6:15 a.m., with the palace still sleeping and security shifts changing, Antoine pulled out a device that would change everything. The portable mass spectrometer was no bigger than a briefcase, but it could detect chemical compounds down to parts per billion. As Antoine calibrated the machine, his hands were shaking. The first reading made him gasp. "Dimethylmethylphosphonate," he whispered, his face draining of color. "Uncle, this is a precursor to sarin gas, but it's been modified, buffered with something to slow its effect." More readings, more horror. The concentration was highest directly above Traoré's desk, where he would sit for hours each day, reading reports, signing documents, slowly breathing in death. "How long?" Jacques asked, though he dreaded the answer. Antoine was frantically calculating on his phone. At this concentration, with daily exposure, maybe 30 days from first contact to organ failure. It would look like a mysterious illness. By the time symptoms became obvious, it would be irreversible. They had discovered a chemical time bomb, and Traore had been breathing it for 23 days. He had 1 week left to live, and he didn't even know he was dying. But who could they trust with this information? The poisoning required inside access, sophisticated chemistry knowledge, and detailed understanding of the president's daily routine. This was clearly an inside job, possibly reaching the highest levels of government. One wrong move, and they'd either be silenced or framed for the assassination themselves. Jacques made another crucial decision. We go to Captain Yameogo. Beatrice Yameogo was the only female member of Traore's security detail, promoted by the president himself over massive resistance from the old guard. She had no connections to the previous regime, no debts to foreign handlers. If anyone could be trusted, it was her. Finding Captain Yameogo at 6:45 a.m. during her morning rounds, Jacques and Antoine must have looked like an unlikely pair of conspirators, a janitor and a medical technician with urgent expressions and portable chemistry equipment. When Antoine showed her the spectrometer readings, her skepticism instantly transformed into alarm. "How long has this been happening?" she demanded. "Based on chemical degradation patterns, approximately 23 days, Antoine replied. "The president has maybe a week before symptoms become irreversible." Yameogo's response was swift and brilliant. She immediately activated Protocol 9, a lockdown procedure that sealed the executive wing and summoned only the most trusted security personnel. Then she did something that surprised everyone. She called Traore directly. "Sir, do not enter your office. I'm coming to your residence immediately with the medical team." 20 minutes later, in a secure room at the presidential residence, Traore sat calmly as Antoine explained the findings. No panic, no dramatics, just the focused attention of a leader processing information that could save or end his life. 23 days, he said quietly. That would mean it started September 16th. He checked his calendar. The day after I announced the currency reform. The day after I expelled the French financial advisors. Dr. Fad Davis, Traore's personal physician, was already running blood tests with portable equipment. "Mr. President, your blood shows elevated acetylcholinesterase inhibition, consistent with organophosphate exposure. We need to begin treatment immediately." But Traore raised his hand. "First, we find who did this." "Doctor, how long before treatment becomes critical?" 48 hours maximum, sir. Beyond that, nervous system damage could be permanent." Traore nodded. "Captain Yameogo, we have 48 hours to find our assassin, but we do this quietly. If they know we've discovered the poison, they might activate backup plans or destroy evidence." What followed was a masterclass in counterintelligence. Instead of massive security sweeps that would alert the conspirators, Yameogo's team worked in shadows. They started with the air conditioning system itself. The Palace HVAC was maintained by Climate Solutions International, a company that had serviced the building for 5 years, without incident. But maintenance logs revealed something suspicious. On September 15th, 1 day before the poisoning began, there had been an emergency repair to the executive wing system. The work order was signed by Deputy Chief Robert Cafando. But when questioned, Fando denied all knowledge. His signature had been expertly forged. Security footage from that day had mysteriously corrupted, showing only static during the 3-hour window when the repair supposedly occurred. The investigation led to Paul Bong, a technician employed by Climate Solutions for only 6 months. When they went to arrest him, his apartment was empty, cleaned out professionally, but not perfectly. Behind a loose bathroom tile, investigators found a single ampule of the modified chemical compound. Proof. But Bong himself had vanished. "He didn't vanish," Traore said, despite poison still coursing through his system. "He's being hidden. Someone with serious resources is protecting him." Captain Yameogo expanded the investigation, checking every financial transaction from Climate Solutions over the past 6 months. What they discovered was a web of connections leading to shocking places. Climate Solutions had received €2 million from a Cyprus shell company just 2 weeks before Bong was hired. When unraveled through 3 layers of ownership, the shell company traced back to Constellation Mining Corp., the same French company whose contracts Traore had terminated on live television months earlier. But the most Shocking discovery came from an unexpected source. The palace had a backup security system that few people knew about, installed years earlier by Chinese contractors. This system had captured what the main cameras missed. At 2:17 a.m. on September 15th, it showed three figures entering the mechanical room housing the air conditioning systems. Two were unidentifiable in maintenance coveralls and masks, but the third made a fatal mistake. For just a moment, he lowered his mask to smoke a cigarette. The face was crystal clear in the Chinese camera's high-definition footage. Michel Sandogo, Deputy Minister of Interior, a man who had served in government for 15 years, who sat in cabinet meetings with Traore, who had pledged loyalty to the revolution. He was also, investigators discovered, the owner of several properties in Paris, purchased through his wife's maiden name with funds far exceeding his government salary. The arrest had to be carefully orchestrated. Sandogo had his own security detail, his own network of loyalists. If alerted, he could flee or activate sleeper cells for broader attacks. Traore, still weak from poisoning but determined to see justice, devised an elegant trap. On October 11th, 43 hours after the poison's discovery, Traore called an emergency cabinet meeting. He appeared healthy, showing no signs of ongoing treatment. The announced topic, new security protocols for government buildings. Sandogo attended, sitting 3 seats from the president, participating in discussions about protecting the very man he'd tried to murder. As the meeting concluded, Traore made a calculated announcement. "I've been informed of a security breach in our air conditioning systems. Someone attempted to introduce a chemical agent. Fortunately, our detection systems caught it before any exposure occurred." He watched Sandogo's face carefully. The deputy minister's expression remained neutral, but his left hand clenched slightly on the table. "I want a full investigation," Traore continued. "Deputy Minister Sandogo, since this involves building security, you're in charge." Brilliant. Sandogo now had to pretend to investigate his own crime. More importantly, it gave Yameogo's team legal cover to monitor his every move, call, and meeting. Within hours, Sandogo made his mistake. He called a number in Abidjan from what he thought was a secure line. The conversation was coded, but the meaning was clear. The operation had failed. Extraction was needed. The arrest came at 3 a.m., not by regular police, but by a special military unit loyal only to Traore. In Sandogo's house, they found the smoking gun, encrypted communications with French intelligence officers, bank statements showing regular deposits from Constellation Mining, and most damning, a detailed timeline of the poisoning plan with a chilling note. Subject should show first symptoms by day 25, full organ failure by day 30. Death will appear natural, likely attributed to unknown tropical disease. Under interrogation, Sandogo broke within hours. The plot went deeper than anyone imagined. He was part of a network called the Restoration, comprised of officials from the old regime who wanted to return Burkina Faso to compliant French client status. Traore's poisoning was just phase 1. Once he died, they planned to blame extremist elements, declare martial law, and invite French forces back to restore order. The network included 3 other ministers, 7 military officers, and dozens of civil servants. But most chilling was the revelation of similar networks in Mali, Niger, and Guinea, all coordinated by what Sandogo called the Paris Working Group, an unofficial alliance of French intelligence, military, and business interests dedicated to maintaining French dominance in Africa. Traore's response was surgical precision instead of mass hysteria. Conspirators were detained quietly, one by one, over a week. Each arrest documented, evidence cataloged, confessions recorded. Then, on October 20th, exactly 1 month after the poisoning began, Traore went public. The press conference was held in the same office where he'd been slowly poisoned. The air conditioning had been completely replaced, but Traore made a point of standing directly under the new vent. "For 23 days, he began, I breathed poison in this office. It was designed to kill me slowly, to make my death appear natural, to avoid international attention that bullets or bombs would bring." He held up a vial of the compound. "This is what they used, a modified nerve agent diluted and dispersed through the air I breathed while working for our nation. They thought they were being clever, sophisticated, invisible. But they forgot something fundamental about Burkina Faso. We are not alone. we have each other. A janitor noticed a strange smell. A young technician identified the poison. A security officer acted without fear. Ordinary citizens saved their president, not because of who I am, but because of what we're building together. The international reaction was immediate and devastating. Using chemical weapons against a head of state crossed every red line. The African Union demanded investigations. The United Nations Security Council held emergency sessions. Even France's traditional allies distanced themselves from what was clearly attempted assassination using banned weapons. The French government denied involvement, claiming Sandago's network were rogue elements. But evidence was overwhelming. Financial trails, communication logs, and poison sophistication that could only come from military-grade laboratories pointed directly to state involvement. The aftermath changed everything. Across Africa, governments began checking their own air conditioning systems, implementing chemical detection protocols. The Traore protocol became standard, regular chemical sweeps of all government buildings. More importantly, it shattered illusions of French invincibility. If they could be caught trying to poison a president, what else were they capable of? What else had they done that hadn't been discovered? Jacques Traoré, the janitor who noticed the smell, became a national hero. Traoré personally awarded him the National Order of Valor and offered any government position he wanted. Jacques chose to return to his original profession, becoming head of a new chemical security division, protecting all government buildings. His first hire, his nephew Antoine as deputy. Captain Yameogo was promoted to general, youngest in Burkina Faso's history, and put in charge of a pan-African intelligence-sharing network designed to detect assassination attempts. Her first classified report identified 17 other attempts on African leaders in the past decade, most never publicized, some successful but attributed to natural causes. The poison itself was a masterpiece of evil chemistry, designed to break down into harmless components after 30 days, leaving no trace in autopsies. If Jacques hadn't noticed that metallic sweetness, if Antoine hadn't had the right equipment, if Captain Yameogo hadn't acted immediately, Traoré would have died, and no one would have known it was murder. Paul Bong, the technician who installed the poison dispenser, was found 3 months later in a shallow grave outside Abidjan, shot execution style, presumably to prevent testimony. But his death came too late. His confession during the brief period between arrest and lawyer arrival provided crucial technical evidence. The modified air conditioning unit is now displayed in Ouagadougou's Museum of Sovereignty alongside spectrometer readings, the poison vial, and Jacques' original maintenance report. A plaque beneath reads, "For 23 days, death flowed through these vents, but vigilance, courage, and solidarity flowed stronger." Traoré recovered fully, though doctors said he was perhaps 72 hours from permanent neural damage when treatment began. In memoirs published years later, he wrote, "I have faced guns, bombs, and coups, but poison in the air taught me the most valuable lesson. Our enemy's greatest weapon is their belief that we won't notice, won't understand, won't act." Jacques Traoré proved them wrong. A janitor with a chemistry degree saved a president and exposed an empire's desperation. Constellation Mining faced international sanctions and lawsuits. Several executives were indicted by the International Criminal Court for conspiracy to commit assassination using chemical weapons. The company eventually declared bankruptcy, its African assets seized and nationalized. But perhaps the most lasting impact was psychological. The image of a president being slowly poisoned while working for his people became a powerful symbol of neo-colonial desperation. It also became a symbol of resistance. If ordinary citizens could detect and stop such sophisticated plots, what couldn't they accomplish together? Today, every October 9th, Burkina Faso observes Vigilance Day, commemorating Jacques' discovery. School children learn chemical safety. Workers are encouraged to report anything suspicious. The message is reinforced. National safety depends not on sophisticated systems or foreign protection, but on citizens watching out for each other. The poison plot failed not because of advanced technology or international intelligence, but because a janitor knew the smell didn't belong, a young technician had courage to test it, and a security officer acted without hesitation. As one historian wrote, "It was the assassination that failed, because Africa remembered to breathe together, and in that shared breath detected the poison meant to kill its dreams. Years later, when asked why he kept working those final 48 hours while knowing he was poisoned, Traore smiled. Every breath I took in that office was an act of defiance. They wanted me to die silently, invisibly. Instead, I lived loudly, publicly, and turned their poison into proof that no matter how sophisticated the weapon, it cannot defeat a people who refuse to stop watching over each other. The sweet smell of death had become the fragrance of freedom. And in that transformation, Africa found a truth no poison could ever kill. Sometimes the janitor saves the president, and sometimes that's exactly how revolution survives. Because in the end, the most powerful weapon against invisible death isn't technology or intelligence. It's ordinary people who refuse to ignore when something doesn't smell right. And that smell, that metallic sweetness that almost killed a president, now serves as a reminder that freedom's greatest defenders often carry mops instead of guns, knowledge instead of titles, and courage instead of credentials. The poison plot was perfect, except for one thing they never calculated. Africa is always watching. Africa is always listening. And Africa never forgets the smell of its own survival.